Welcome. How are you?
It's so good to see you again. Yay.
You know, it's like amazing how the time goes by so fast. And it's like we've talked, and then it seems like the world has happened in between the last time we connected, right?
Yeah, a lot has happened since then.
Well, I'm looking forward to diving into all of that with you. I want to say welcome to you, Eliza VanCort, and all of our listeners. Welcome to Conversations in the Nick of Time. I'm your host, Nikki Roach, and this platform, which focuses on leadership excellence and accidents, powered by Sparkman Pathway to Careers and KSTL Jubilee 690 AM. I am just so excited always to have your ear, your heart bent this way. Here we talk about a number of different things, and the journey of a leader can be very complex, very, very dynamic, very unconventional. And in these days, right now, with all that's happening around the world,
Yes.
what my guest today, my friend today, Eliza VanCort, is going to cover could not be more timely. Some of you may remember we've had a number of chances, well, actually one, to record a conversation that we've had, and she joined us and just laid some jewels on us and gems, and we had to have her come back because why? The secret is out. The book is out. Yeah. What's
So
up with
excited.
herself? Yes, she is a feminist, an author, an activist, a mentor, a teacher, a mother, a human, and most amazing woman. I love it.
Mm.
So she's a student both of performing arts and political science. Eliza has dedicated herself to empowering people of all experiences and backgrounds. Her two top keynote as of yesterday, because it's going to shift after today. Her keynotes have been on education, training, and dismantling racism. And they are not only highly engaging, but impactful and informative, really bringing you to a place of not just understanding, but of action. And I love this. They are extremely tough in the world that we live in. And her first book, when I talk about timing and God's timing, my goodness, A Woman's Guide to Claiming Space. Stand tall, raise your voice, and be heard. It's said to be transformative. I've got a sneak peek. I've thumbed through some pages, even virtually, and hard copy. And Eliza VanCort, Madame, this you've hit it out the park.
Thank
Without a
you.
cape, as you say, a superhero without a cape.
Thank
Oh, I
you.
love it. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. When you were saying all those nice things about me, all I kept thinking is one of the gifts of this whole experience is meeting women who are so amazing. And I'm just so blessed and thankful to be on your show because I just think you're absolutely extraordinary. And you're my friend, but you're also just an amazing, accomplished woman. So thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I get goosebumps when I think about the work that you do because I am a big advocate for it needs to impact head, heart, and hand.
Mm-hmm.
Starts
Mm-hmm.
here, but it needs to come from it starts here in the head, it comes from the heart, and then it moves to
Mm.
the hand for action. And when I tell you, you do that well and in excellence, and now we have this roadmap, we being women,
Yes.
roadmap to
Yes.
get us to this place. So tell us a little bit about like how you arrived at this. I love the title, Claim Space, claiming your space. Tell us
Yes.
how we arrived at this.
Well, it was really a circuitous route. My life has kind of been like that. I never kind of take the straight path. It's always the long way there. But it really started with a lot of trauma. When I was younger, my mother was paranoid schizophrenic. She became very ill when I was 4.5. So she was a wonderful mother until then. And she took me across the country illegally by kidnapping me. I was actually considered an illegal kidnapping. And I went from truck stop to truck stop to truck stop, hitchhiking across the country from New York to California. And if you can imagine hitchhiking in trucks, all the way there, and the stuff that happens as a mother now, I look back on it and I think, if something happened like to my child like that, I don't know what I would do. So I learned very quickly to be invisible. I felt like the best way to be safe was just to become invisible. And I had this long sheet of hair I would hide behind. And slowly, I was just so thankful. And, I talk about this in my book. I had all these women after it was all over who came to me, came to my father, stepped in. My Roberta Wallet, my kindergarten teacher, took me in as her own daughter and took me to her house every day. I had a big sister, Alice Green, in the Big Sister Big Brother program, which you should totally participate in, and all these, a village. And I started to come out of myself, but I still wasn't really claiming space fully. I kind of thought I was, but I wasn't. And then in 2014, I had been a teacher at this point, an acting teacher, and I'd gone to school for political science, as you said. And I was riding my bike and I got hit by a car. Somebody was texting and driving, and they decided it was a better idea to text and drive than just drive. And they hit me in the head with their car. I like to tell people I got hit in the head with a car. And my daughter always says, that sounds so dramatic. And I'm like, actually, it happened. So I got hit by a car. And I got thrown on the hood of her car, got thrown into the middle of the intersection, hit the other side, had a bilateral brain injury, woke up, couldn't remember anything. So I would go to sleep at night with my day intact, wake up with half my day gone. And ever so slowly, I started getting my day back. And I thought, okay, this is great. I'm going to be okay. Besides the fact that I'm a little different now, like I hated raw tomatoes before, and now I crave them. There are lots of weird things like that. But besides that, I'm going to be fine. But why is everyone acting so strangely around me? And so my best friend, Kim, and we all need one of those sisters in our lives, but my best friend, my sister, Kim, was over, and I said, I have several women best friends, but she's one of the little, the tiny, the ride or die women. And I said, Kim, why is everyone so weird? And she said, Eliza, they're not. It's you. You're acting strangely. You're talking like have a really reduced vocabulary. You're just not really there. Later, people told me that I seemed like I was high, and I had no idea. So I realized that if I was going to do what I loved, which has always been about, communication. I mean, that's what I do. I'm a teacher. I'm an educator. I was going to have to rebuild my communication brick by brick. And what I eventually figured out, and I did research, I watched people, I watched myself, I scoured through everything I could get my hands on. And a lot of it's really based on white men. So it's not that easy to find something that covers everybody. And I realized that there were some women out there that had a consistent theme in their life. They had something that they did that no one else did. And I kept thinking, it's claiming space. What is this? And eventually I broke it down into 5 different parts. And I realized the women who did these 5 things were just killing life. And so I made it my mission to do that. Once I figured out how to do that and I was recovered, I became passionate about teaching other people, because you shouldn't have to be in the head with a car to figure this out. So the book is based on those 5. The book is divided into 5 parts, and it's those 5 things.
So I want to go back. You mentioned the fact that you did all you could to remain invisible.
Yes.
Do you know how powerful that statement is? Like, you intentionally had behavior to keep yourself invisible. I'm trying to fight back some tears here because I think that's going to resonate with a lot of listeners. Yes, on this book is for women, but I think many across gender can associate with such a comment. What does that mean, though, for you? How can we unpack that?
Yeah. Well, I will say, just as a side note, I've had several Black men do pre-reads of it, and they've all said, there's a lot here I relate to. So I do think it has some intersectionality that way as well. Well, for me, I think of it, I don't know if you're a dog person, but if you've ever seen a dog at a dog park, how they immediately submit. So they show their neck and they say, hey, I'm not dangerous. I'm not dangerous. You're in charge. And then the other dog leaves them alone. And I think sometimes as people, especially if you're part of a targeted group, you start to learn that you're going to have to fight to a certain extent. And you can fight you can fight with love. There are lots of ways to fight, but you're going to have to fight if you decide not to submit. And so a lot of people choose to be smaller because the pushback is it's a safe short-term plan. But I believe that in the long term, you give up a little piece of your soul every time you do that. And so I think it's so important for women, to be brave about that. And to me, I have a different definition of bravery, but to be brave and to resist the urge to take the short route to safety at the expense of the long-term realization of themselves.
Yeah, and then there's also, it says in some of the literature that women fight pressure to make themselves small in
Mm-hmm.
private, professional, and public spaces.
Mm-hmm.
We fight pressure to make ourselves small.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, in the book, I talk about something called high and low playing behaviors, which are different kinds of behaviors that, if you cede power, you do these behaviors. If you take power, you do these behaviors. And women are rewarded for doing the low playing behaviors. We're rewarded for that. So one example is constant smiling. And I love to smile. I'm an extrovert. I love humans, but I'm not talking like smiling once in a while. I'm talking constant smiling because it's the job of the person in the targeted group who doesn't have power to make the power structure comfortable. So we smile and we smile even when we're not happy. We smile. Everything's fine. Everything's fine. When it's
Yeah,
not,
and we say it's fine.
it's fine. Everything. No, it's fine. No, don't worry about it. It's fine. When it's not fine. When it's not fine.
And so that is that invisibleness,
Mm-hmm.
smallness that we lean into
That's right.
unconsciously sometimes because
Absolutely.
we're so, I think it's second nature. Because as you're talking, I'm thinking like, okay, yeah, I'm a smiler.
Mm-hmm.
I love to come and be light in
Mm-hmm.
places. However, I get what you're saying to where
Mm-hmm.
it is very much the fact that we're dimming our light.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
It's kind of
That's
like
right.
I'm here, but you don't like don't notice me, but I'm
Right.
okaying it.
Right. Right. I'm giving you permission to let me be small. I'm
We
ceding
really,
my power
yeah, we're
to
really
you.
pushing it. Yeah.
Right. And women do it in a million ways. I mean, I have this wonderful photo that I looked at just a little bit after my accident. And I was standing with my family. My toes are pointed together, which is it's a childish behavior, right? Little girls point their toes together, but women get a lot of props for looking cute and putting their toes together like little girls. My head is tilted down like I'm shy and I have heels on. I'm very off balance because I just had my accident. Why would I sit with my toes pointed together? I literally had to hang on to my own children who had to help me stand up because I was still off balance from the accident. And I chose not only to wear heels that were wobbly, but stand in a position that was the least stable possible. And, that is because women are rewarded for these kind of small behaviors. And for me, so much of what we face are these moment by moment choices of safety. How do we keep our safety and still claim our space? And that's one of the things I really work on because it is unsafe if you claim space in certain ways. I mean, as a white woman, I don't have the threat of death if I stand up to a police officer. If you are a Black woman, you claim too much space that a white woman would be able to claim with no problem, and you could be risking your life. So I'm not saying, everybody should go out and just claim space and not worry about it. The book is I really tried to make it intersectional and make sure that I'm not just going from a whiteness perspective of whiteness. And how do you navigate claiming space given the different intersecting issues that you're facing because of what society's doing?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because what's interesting is that you talk about, the privileges in which
Mm-hmm.
this, and then so even for us, like if we go out and grab tea, for
Right.
a moment of catching up and some sister friend time,
That's
and
right.
depending on where we are, that experience could be very different, whether you show
Mm-hmm.
and make reservations or ask to be seated versus me.
Mm-hmm.
However, I still want to be mindful that I deserve
That's right.
to have space also.
Mm-hmm.
And it should
Mm-hmm.
not be something that is as if I'm a puppet being pulled with strings
That's right.
that depict how I show up, how I take up that space. But I will be honest. is that at some points, though, there are, how we have the fright, flight, freeze,
Hmm.
all of
That's
that,
right.
to where that is real,
Right.
depending on the environment, depending on the
Hmm.
culture, depending on,
Hmm.
fill in the blank. Again, if the two of us were to go out into the world to apply for a job, to
Totally.
lead a conversation amongst a group, to show up to lecture to a different
That's
group,
right.
just showing up in the room, we have to be cautious of the very thing you're talking about in regards to how is it that we are claiming that space.
That's right. Yeah.
But I think for me, where I was going with that as well is making sure that I don't buy into, because sometimes we buy into this idea that I need to wait for permission to
Hmm.
show to claim my space.
Right. Right.
But some of that behavior has to be unlearned. And I think we're seeing in this current climate the pushback from that.
Yes, yes. One of the women who I quote in the book, who's amazing, and if you ever are looking for someone to do anti-racist work, she's brilliant. She's a mentor of mine, Dr. Nia Nunn, and she talks about how one of her students said, a young Black woman said, "When I walk in a room, my womanhood doesn't walk in first. My Blackness walks in first."
That's true.
And so I have to, and Kimberly Crenshaw, who you coined intersectional feminism, the idea that, as a white woman, I'm navigating one thing, you're navigating two, and yours is much more life and death than mine, frankly, and so I think one thing I talk about in the book is something called the safety scale, which is, I started really thinking about this, and I noticed it when I was recovering, that everybody in the world walks in a room and we have two extremes: total emotional safety and total physical danger. And depending on who you are, you spend a lot of your life, and very few people live at total physical danger, although Black people encounter that much more in this society. But we spend a lot of time navigating in between and figuring out, how do I not fall into physical danger? How do I push myself more toward emotional safety? And so so one of the things the book talks about is the two pressures we face. One is internal. I'm a nerd. So I call it my emotional kryptonite. What are the things that I've been trained to do? And one example I give with that is, when you're little, my favorite example, I had a little boy, I had a terrible crush on him, terrible crush. And when we were little, I remember he spit on me once. So I booked it to his mom's house and I was like, "So-and-so spit on me." And he spit on me. Oh, and then he stopped and then he hit me. So he spit on me, then he hit me. And so I said, "He spit on me and he hit me." And she said, "Oh, Eliza, it's just because he likes you." Right? And every woman I tell this story to says he likes you.
You're gonna say that.
Yeah, every woman's like, it doesn't matter what race, he likes you. What are we taught? That the way in which we can see if a man likes us is if he is abusive to us.
Oh
If he's,
my God.
so we're teaching little girls, if a boy hits you, that means he likes you. So it's okay. As long as he likes you, he can hit you. And I think that it actually translates into verbal abuse. And that's part of the kryptonite. We've been trained to think, well, I wonder why he did that, as opposed to, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter why someone makes you small. It doesn't matter if someone hits you. It doesn't matter what they say. The impact is all that matters. I don't care if someone likes me. If you like me and you want to make me small, I don't like you. Like, sorry. So,
Right?
right, I don't like you. And then the other part is the outside influences, that no matter how much you've conquered your kryptonite, you're going to experience this, and different groups experience it to different extents. So that's mansplaining, sexual harassment, interruptions, all of those, and abusive relationships. How do we navigate those? So and what I talk about in the book really is learning how you respond on that scale. So oh, when this thing happens, I do this. How can I make sure that I have an antidote to that when I fall into this place on the scale?
Yeah. Now I know also in the book, I love the cover. I love,
Yeah.
I mean, and you claim all the space on that.
Yes, I do.
And I applaud people and you um, having such a strong presence on the cover and
Mhm.
using the space, opening your arms, your chest, your head is up. I love it.
Mhm.
But how important, because I think even just the cover sends a message.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
how was that strategy? Or was there strategy in the creating this very clever cover?
Well, I really wish I could have shown you this other picture of me, but there is a picture. I took so many pictures where I was basically like spread eagled, like I was like sitting in a chair with it backwards, you know? And so
Yeah.
my legs were like way out and I had very long legs, so I kind of looked like a spider. And I remember looking at it going, I think I may have gone overboard on that one. But, you know,
A little bit.
right, right. But I do think there is a message, not just to make ourselves emotionally small, to make ourselves physically small. So I wanted to claim space physically. And, you know, I remember being on an airplane once and there was this dude next to me and, you know, he took both the armrests and I was like, no, friend, that's not happening. So I like push my arm onto the armrest. He pushes back. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to sit here and push. So I was like sitting there pushing on his arm. We were in a competition. None of us were saying anything. And eventually he looked over to me and I looked at him and gave him a little smile like, nope, you're just not going to do this.
No,
And
because like,
eventually he pulled his arm back. But I was
that's a
like, no.
that's a great example of
Yeah.
how something that small to where it's like like he just bumped you out and I,
Right.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say obviously he wanted you to just back down.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Normal case, we would kind of just like, oh well, okay, it's no big deal.
Right.
But no, you wanted to put your arm there too.
And I think so much of what we do as women is navigating when it's a big deal because we can't, you know what I mean? We can't get every single thing. We just can't. So when do we what are the moments where we go, you know, this is where I draw the line? Because, you know, they've done research actually on Black women that and Black men that they pay something called a emotional tax. I don't know if you've read about that. Yeah. So
And it's
so
real.
yeah, right, that you're navigating whiteness so much that you actually don't have as much energy to do other stuff because white people are making you navigate all their stuff. And
As well as you wanting me to show up and produce and serve an excellence,
right,
which is, I was an excellence. However, if I'm, as you say, trying to navigate all the written, but mostly the unwritten rules,
mm-hmm,
the systemic issues, the systemic racism
mm-hmm,
that we ignore all
mm-hmm,
too often, despite having chief diversity officers, despite having advocates and champions.
mm-hmm,
So, air quotes, still having to navigate all of that. And then
mm-hmm,
you want us to show up but we're drained. And then
mm-hmm.
when we, just like with the elbows on the armrest, like
Right,
we don't know which one is going to be available. And if it is available, but if I fight for it, now I'm too aggressive.
right. Oh, especially as a
Or
Black woman.
if I don't say something, then I'm not present.
That's
I'm
right.
not showing up enough. So it's
Right,
where is that thin line where I do speak up and claim
right,
my space, but then I shrink like a violet out of water because I don't want to become the one that's, kind of, oh, you've ruined your personal brand, because now that's the other thing. You don't want to ruin your
right,
brand
right,
by being difficult, by not being
right.
compliant and cooperative. So it's just all of this, all of
Yeah.
this
I
amazing.
actually, the kind of the kind of racism you're describing, I have a term for it. I call it top shelf racism, which is like the kind of racism where you're like, oh, here, drink this. It goes down real smooth, but it's still alcohol. It's the same thing. You're just dressing it up and making it look really pretty in a nice label.
On a label, right? And it's
Right.
tricky, right?
Right. You're like, it can't be bad for you. It's top shelf. Like, no, it's still got 45 proof. Sorry. Like, and I think one of the things that we as white people have a really hard time with is understanding how many times we are perpetuating top shelf racism when we don't know it. And so then when people call us on it, we're like, that's not true. No, it's you, it's you, it's you. And then, And then of course, how do you ever have a relationship with someone if you can't actually listen to them and believe them?
That's the key. And I think it's the same even with this claiming the space.
Mm-hmm.
Also, there's something that we as women have to do. Upon reading this book, you get in some instructions, or like Alma Derrick says in the foreword, she says, with uncommon wisdom, grace, and grit, she brings a hug, kick, and a thunderclap that every woman in her life needs to hear again and again and again and again. And I love that because it is a reminder, like it's because we have so much behavior that is just a part of our natural being, and
Mm-hmm.
how we just naturally, organically, authentically show up, but we don't
Mm-hmm.
want that. And that has
Yes.
to be unlearned. So
Yeah. I mean, I think of it as the Matrix because I am the biggest nerd ever. But I think of it like the Matrix, that moment where Neo sees all the HTML on the wall, and then he's like, the bullets come, and he's like, no, and the bullets go down. When I started cracking this code, I started realizing, oh, wow, once you see all these dynamics, once you see you can break down these behaviors, it's so much easier to attack them, which is why I kind of wanted to out them all. Like, okay, so you're doing a high playing behavior to me. Okay, I know what that is. I know what you're doing. How am I going to respond to that? As opposed to, why do I feel like I'm being made to be very small, but I can't put my finger on why? And I wanted people to understand the why
and what's
of,
the high playing?
hmm?
The high playing.
Yeah, there's a woman named Deborah Grundy. She's a researcher out of Stanford. She did this thing for women in business, but I think it applies to everything in life. She just cracked the code of body language and power dynamics. And I talk about it in the book and I add my own take on it. But it's really about, when are you going to take power? When are you going to cede power? And learning if someone is trying to take your power,
Wonderful.
which I think is a big, really, really, really important.
Wonderful.
I was actually thinking about this. Am I allowed to say the B word on this show or no? Or should I just say B? I'll say B. Okay. So there's actually a chapter about words used to silence women. And I think a lot of that is what we fear. And so I broke them down into 3 categories, which is feminist, crazy, and the B word. And if you're a woman who advocates for yourself, you're a feminist, and therefore there's all these reasons why you're bad, bad, bad. And I talk about the history of what happens to women who did that for themselves. If you are crazy, there are so many things women would stand up for themselves. They'd be crazy. They'd be locked in a room or whatever. It's just wild. Or the B word, you express, I didn't like that. Just simple. I didn't like that. And, a Black woman will be labeled an angry Black woman. There are all of these, you've gone too far. And so I go through and I dissect all the words in those categories because they're really umbrella words for other things. Oh, she's so abrasive. She's so aggressive. She's bossy, and just sort of, so we can go, oh, I know you're putting me in that category and I know what to do. And then I talk about what you can do. And actually the most fun is that I couldn't help it. At the end of that chapter, I decided to make superheroes. So we have a cartoon, which my 2 nieces are in with me.
Okay.
And we are crazy feminist bees. We have CFB on our, and we have capes behind us.
So you just merged them all together. We'll just all the above.
Yeah. Well, I was like, what if we just turn those words into superhero words and we refuse to let them silence us? So then I decided I would end the chapter with women being those words as superheroes.
But that's also another strategy, I think, of claiming our space, to where it's
yes.
just like I just recently learned, I was reading in Seth Godin's book, The Practice, and he talked about understand, and it may not even be The Practice, it may be the other book, but he was touching on imposter syndrome and how imposter syndrome, understanding, yes, that's us thinking that we'll be found out, we'll be a fraud, for those who don't know what that is. But it's a behavior we begin to take on to where we do begin to shrink and downplay ourselves and become invisible, right, while still trying to show up at the same time. So it's this internal battle. But he's like, consider like all leaders, anyone who's doing something new, anyone that's doing something different is an imposter, because we don't have a roadmap. We don't know what's going on. Right. Imposter meaning that we don't know everything. And so it brought that to mind, because just what you said, how do we take part of claiming our space is stop taking things at face value or
Mhm.
as someone is giving. We don't have to accept what is just being dumped on us.
That's
So if
right.
someone says crazy, yes, I'm crazy about making sure we get the right outcomes.
Right,
You
right,
know, and
right, exactly.
I'm passionate about it. So don't just own what was dumped on us, is what I'm hearing
Hmm.
you also say.
Absolutely. And I give strategies for that. I mean, one of the best ways to do it is to ask a question. When someone says, you're acting a little crazy, you say, I'm confused what you mean by that. And then they'll say, well, you're just overreacting. Can you explain why?
But do you know how confident, like how confident we have to be to even come back like that?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. But the beauty is if you ask a question, they can't say you're being aggressive because you just asked a question. So you're just, I'm confused. I had a client who was, she was a Black woman. She was in all white and very few women, white women. And she made this huge amount of money for her company. And in front of everybody, the CEO was like, I want to thank so-and-so. She's a client, I can't say her name, but I want to thank so-and-so for doing this wonderful thing and in making all this money for us. And then he said, so-and-so, I hope you didn't go out and spend all of it on a purse in front of the whole group, in front of the whole group. And she said, and she had worked with me. And so she knew what to do. And actually, two women had a very similar experience that I worked with about someone saying, don't spend it on a purse, which I was like, what the? But she literally just dropped her smile and she just looked at him and said, what do you mean? And he had to,
In front of it. So back to that power dynamic.
mm-hmm,
Speaking of,
mm-hmm.
don't let that overshadow. She came back with the even greater force in front of the same group.
Yeah, what do you mean? And what are they
Not
going to say? You said, what do you mean? What can they do? And I consider those kind of things as microaggressions, emotional snipers. I think of them as emotional snipers. They're out there and you can't see them and you're like, why am I bleeding? But when you ask a question, you flush them out. They have to come into the open. And ultimately, people who are doing microaggressions are bullies. And bullies
I said
don't
the
like
same.
to be called out.
I said the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So for me, asking questions, I talk about different ways you can strategize and ask questions so that people have to have their stuff reflected back on them. I think that's so important.
Yeah, speaking of reflecting, we are in a very, very historical season in the United
Yes.
States, for a number of reasons. But one to
Mm-hmm.
highlight is our election, the
Mm-hmm.
inauguration, and
That's right.
us now having um, Biden in office as the president of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
I am most impressed and inspired by him. He
Mm-hmm.
reminds me that it is never too late.
That's right.
I'm going to say to claim our space.
That's right.
It's never too late, and to never too late to serve. Find a way to serve others and
Mm-hmm.
communities. Then we have a vice president,
Yes.
Kamala Harris, who is
Yes. Your
the vice,
queen.
yes, the highest ranking female elected official in the U.S. history.
And
History.
in the world now, in the world, the
Yes,
most powerful woman in the world.
the first African American and first Asian American vice president
Mm-hmm.
and person of power, as you just mentioned, in this capacity.
Yes.
How is it? Because now we have all this change in such a high, visible,
Mm-hmm.
prominent space, highly respected. Um, and what does this do to, in your opinion, to for women? And yes, men too, but we're focusing on the women of
Right.
our space. How does this impact your work and your insight now that
Well,
you've gone through this and experienced something we never never thought would happen in our lifetime?
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I wish I could say it's positive. In some ways it is. I think it's more positive for the younger generation. But what I have heard
Why is
thus, huh?
why is that?
What I've heard thus far from some people is that there are men who are feeling a little more threatened. And so there's a little more pushback in ways there just wasn't before. And if you think about it, we had the Obamas, we had the first Black president, and then we had Trump, which was like the swing over to white supremacy, so and I feel like a lot of times when people feel they're losing, and it is true, when you are in power, you will cede power if you are truly devoted to change, because you have an unfair share of it.
Yeah.
And people don't. Oh, go ahead. Oh, people don't.
Go ahead.
People don't like giving up their power at all.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that men don't like giving up their power to women. White people don't like giving up their power to Black people. We want to believe that we are doing it, but we really don't.
We get the drip effect. There's a drip effect, and to me, that is celebrated too much.
Yes. And representation matters, but what matters more is that little Black girls go to schools that are just as good as little white girls. That we are making sure that the hiring is fair. All of those things. These are the things that we are working on, anti-Black violence and stopping that. All of these things that intersect with womanhood that we need to work on as a society. These are the things. I love that Kamala Harris is there. I cried as I watched her be sworn in. I cried so hard. And then hearing the poet laureate, I was on my knees at that point.
Yes.
I was just on my knees. It was so beautiful. And I'm so glad they did that. But at the same time, I think all of us need to do two things. One is when a woman gets in power, as we saw with Barack Obama, when any targeted group, he wore a tan suit, everybody lost their damn minds, So, she's going to continue to get so much pushback. And I feel like every woman needs to stand behind her like an army and say, nope, that's not happening. We support this woman. And if you do that, we will come back at you. Like, we will match you. We will talk about how this is not okay. We're not going to just be silent. And then the other thing is make sure that this administration is putting forth the policies they need to, because they're going to get a lot of pushback from people who are afraid of losing power. And so we need to make sure we are moving forward and really supporting what they're doing and holding them accountable, because representation matters. But as we saw in the Trump administration, there was some representation and not much, very little, but the people who were in those roles weren't doing a lot for people of color at all.
Yeah. Now I know there's a number of things that the book, I love it. And when we talk about claiming the space and power, even this power dynamic, the instructions for us as women as we move forward, you've provided me with a claiming your space cheat sheet. I love it, which kind of gives us some information to move forward just in a snapshot.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to make sure that we give just a couple of insights as we begin to wind our time, not forever. You're always welcome here. But there's this 5-part component that you spoke of earlier. And just if you can kind of glaze over, just like
what are the 5 parts?
Yeah, part 1, physically claiming your space and being visible. Walk us through some of that.
Absolutely. So the first part is claiming physical space. And that is old-fashioned communication, claiming space with your body, claiming space with your voice, making sure that you are not ceding space to any person. And I want to be really clear, not every woman wants to sit with her legs apart. Not every woman wants to take up physical space in the same way every other woman does, but it's about finding looking at your baseline and saying, is this how I want the world to see me? And if it's not, how can I make sure, what changes can I do? So I actually break down things like posture. How do you use your voice to project confidence and strength? Really basic mechanical things. I actually have goofy drawings of me doing them. And then the other one is claiming space collaboratively, amplifying each other. And that's about forging friendships that uplift you. There's such an old boys network. I really believe we need to forge an old girls network. And what I talk about, I think a lot of people, when they address connection and networking, talk about how to build those relationships. But I actually start with something very different, which is who is in, I'm a nerd, so I said Justice League, but who is in your Justice League that is actually an anti-mentor? Who is in your Justice League that is making you small? And making sure those people are out as well.
You know,
And
that is so interesting. Had a guest on, this was back a year ago, and Dr. Elance McCarthy, and he had mentioned that we should step back and identify who are the top 10 people that we're spending the most time with.
mm-hmm.
And out of that list, could we possibly do some type of business with those 10? If not,
Mm-hmm.
they could be rotated off the top 10 list.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
business meaning collaborating
Mm-hmm.
in some capacity. And one thing
Yes.
that I've learned that some groups will do over others, which is bartering. Even, something as
Oh
small as, oh, you right? Oh, I speak. How do we pull each other up into these different spaces where, like, if you have space, I have space, and we both win? My thing is, like, the world is our playing ground. So there's
Right.
no shortage when we talk about giving up that power.
Right.
There's room for all of us.
Yeah, that's right. That's
So
right.
this claiming space collaboratively, very strategic of you to bring that in. We don't hear enough of that. We hear
Oh,
networking, but networking really brings us just to a surface level of engagement.
that's right. That's right. And I think I think about it as forging connection. So for example, you and I like each other. We genuinely like each other. So it's fun for us to collaborate. And if any opportunity comes up, I'm going to send it your way, and vice versa. Right? Because it's like we have a real desire to uplift each other. And networking to me feels like be nice to people that you don't like. And I don't who aren't kind to you, just network. And I don't think you should just network. I think you should surround yourself with like-minded people who will work with you, and we will raise each other up together. And that is a different way of looking at it. And it's a very woman-centered way rather than the old male model, really, which is just.
Was it transactional versus
That's right. Oh, I love that. I should have stole it from my book. If I do part 2, I'm going to quote you. So that's really important. I mean, at the beginning of the pandemic, I lost a week's worth of work, a year's worth of work in a week. And I was terrified. 6 figures I lost in a week. And because academia shut down. And they stopped all outside contractors. So and I go to the same places every year, and they all called me in tears. These people are my friends now. But what was incredible to me was twofold. One is I had relationships with these people, and they referred me to other people. But then also my girlfriends stepped up, my network, my sisters, and they all said, oh, well, I'm going to send you here. I'm going to send you here. I'm going to send you here. And that is because we have been continuously raising each other up. So I think that's so important. And I think that, we don't have a social network that the government provides in this country. We have each other, and we need to raise each other up. So that's huge for me. The other one is claiming space in any situation, shutting down. And I talked about that, shutting down those microaggressions. I actually have a funny thing in the book, which is one of my friends read the mansplaining chapter. And she said, this should be in every restaurant, everywhere, blah, blah, blah. And so I thought, what if I did first aid for mansplaining instead of first aid for choking? So we have cartoons, first aid for choking, but it's first aid for mansplaining. And it kind of breaks down what they are, like the hijack and all of these things, and then how to handle it. So that's really fun. And then how the final one, which I think is really important. And I also do neutralize your kryptonite, which we talked about as well. But then the final one is committing to intersectionality, creating a better world for all of us. And my belief is that unless you are the women who do the best in the world, spiritually, emotionally, professionally, they are intersectionally claiming space. I believe if you are claiming space for all, aren't claiming space for all women, you're not claiming space. Claiming space demands solidarity and unity, and approaching work and life with an open heart and an open mind, and listening and believing and advocating for each other. Because as I say in the book, when we rise together, we rise so much higher. Yeah. And so for me, that is the end of the book. And it does actually, one of the things that is very important to me about this book doing well is that I really do call out white women and say, you know, we have to get our act together. We are not doing right by our sisters. And here are the things we're not doing. And here's what we need to do differently. And I don't think that a lot of books do that so clearly. But to me, you can't claim space if you don't. And so it was hard to get this book published because it was considered a little different in that sense, because I was talking about white fragility, and I had to explain, this is about womanhood. You know, this is about womanhood.
And the fact that we sisters, African-American women, we need you all.
Like, right.
You have access that we would never have in some spaces. And not That's that right. I'm a big advocate for the fact that yes, we can do and build and create our own, but my God, like, why would we not want to partner and unite and come together?
That's right.
As human beings.
Right.
For human greatness. You know, it's like, but we need you all. And I don't think that point has been really understood. And the fact that I know I'm doing some work with an organization based here in the Midwest that focuses on the advancement of women of color who are stuck in the pipeline in middle. And we have did over a year of work and research, and found that one of the major barriers is advocacy and championship and relationship with white women.
Yes.
But especially white men.
And
until that, like, there has to be work. That work has to be done. And so I applaud you for, and that's why I tell people, it's not one person's job to take us all the way to the promised land or to the mountaintop. But every part of how you're claiming space, are you back or holding someone's hand next to you that's different from you?
That's so amazing that you said that, because the last line in my book is something to the effect of, you know, claim your space, then reach back and take the hands of your sisters and pull them with you. Like, but at the same time, the other, for me, is from a white perspective, I also think that when I went through my journey on race, and I don't believe in being woke, I think it's ridiculous. I don't think you can ever be woke, because, you know, I call it woking, because how are you ever going to know, right? You never understand race if you're white, but you're learning, and you hope to learn your whole life. But before I even started really woking, I didn't have the same relationships with Black women. I thought I did, but they were handling me because I wasn't safe. You know, and I was really like, oh, you know, rights for Black people, but I didn't have certain experiences that allowed me to get it on a deeper level. And now the relationships I have are so much deeper and richer and real. And my girlfriends of color, they call me out, which, you know, and I have had white women say to me, well, none of my girlfriends call me out. And I'm like, well, then you're not safe. That's on you.
So what is it in you that shifted to make you feel okay with that?
Well, I talk about in the book how two of my nieces are young women of color. And I think that was part of it. I think I was open to it because when my mother took me, I landed in foster care, and I was in an all Black foster care in an all Black neighborhood, the only white girl that I saw. I didn't see any white girls for a long time. And that was the safest place I'd ever been. And so that was huge for me, because my foster mother was a rock. And that was my first sort of experience with Black women, is basically a savior. And so that, I think, and my first really good friend was a little girl of color. So I think that was huge, but it still didn't do it, right? In fact, in some ways it worked against me, because I was like, I get race. I was in all Black foster care, which I totally didn't get. But then I saw some of what they went through, my nieces, and I saw how they both have white siblings. And I saw the different experiences that those sets of siblings had. And I talked to the moms, and just the systematic, no matter what they did, no matter how well things were going, it didn't matter. It didn't matter. They still had every barrier thrown at them. And so I think sometimes you need to have someone you love who, I mean, get choked up, but who breaks your heart. If you watch their pain and you go, whoa, I'm part of this structure that is hurting people. And I think you have to really do that. So then the next step is making sure you're open to what I call just identifying your own white fragility attack. So one of my girlfriends quite a while ago, I still remember this moment, I was saying something and she said, I didn't like that for such and such a reason. And she's a Black woman. And I started explaining why. Well, let me explain why. No, you don't get it. Da, da, da. And she said, Eliza, you're being really white right now. And I said, no, you don't understand. And she said, now you're being even whiter. She's like, I'm telling you about my experience. All I need you to do is shut up and listen. That's it. And it was this click moment for me where I was like, no, why am I arguing with her about what she just experienced? That's insane. And that's when I started to say, okay, part of being friends with people who are different than you is being okay, being uncomfortable and welcoming it and understanding that's part of your learning process and understanding that the benefits of that, the deepness and the beauty and the truth of the relationships far outweighs any white fragility attack you could possibly have.
Wow. Like this is so rich. This conversation is so rich because not only, again, are you claiming space for self, but you're reaching behind, across, I like to say across,
That's right.
and up and beneath and all over.
Mm-hmm.
To make sure someone's coming along.
That's right. Well, what I always joke about is I'm like, listen, men are totally divided. So, it's a really bad short-term plan for us to not be united, because if we were united, we'd be unstoppable because they're not. So we should just unite, because think of what we could do together if we all listened to each other and supported each other. And I really believe, hate to bring this up, but in the pandemic, the countries who did the best had women leaders.
And on that note, how can people find the book?
Oh, yes. I thought you never asked. I'm so glad that you're talking about this book, because I want more books like this to be written. I want more books like this to be written that actually are about all women and that are about raising each other up. And I just so appreciate it. So anyway, you can go to Amazon and just Google A Woman's Guide to Claiming Space and it will pop up. But you can also go to my website, which is elizavancourt.com. Now everybody puts a U in court. There is no U. So it's ELIZA, like Eliza Doolittle, VANCORT.com. And I have links all over my website saying buy my book. So, and we're really hoping that it does a really good showing this week. And we send a message to publishers that these books sell.
Wonderful. And we'll be sure, of course, on our end to post that as well, so people can get this information and buy it. If you get one, once you're done with it, pay it forward so somebody else can claim a little more space. That's also how you help claim space as well.
Yeah, support each other in our work. Totally.
Now you have the platform to communicate one strategy or one thought regarding the importance of claiming space in this, to our women. We're just going to narrow it to the women right now.
Yeah.
What one last closing message would you have for them?
This sounds so simple, but I think it's the hardest one. And that is, believe you have the right to claim space. Because everybody always gives us the message that we don't. We have the right to claim space. We are 50% of the population. We should be claiming 50% of the space, and it is our right.
With that, we have been given instructions, a snapshot and a glimpse into the journey of how you arrived. I want to thank you so much, Eliza, for making time. Anytime we can be of assistance to you, this platform is here for all the great work that you're doing to help us, women especially, learn how to claim our space, to stand tall, to raise our voice, and to be heard. I also want to just let you know how honored I am for your level of respect and partnership and collaboration to trust this platform with this message. And also, you messed me up when you acknowledged your mom in the book, and the
Mm-hmm.
fact that you state that you are also claiming this space for her. And I am just closing out with a prayer to and for you, that as you begin to equip women all over the world, that we can also stand in the gap for your mom,
Oh,
Louise Marie VanCort, as well.
oh, thank you. You just touched my heart.
It's just amazing because there's even more lessons for those of us who can't even find our voice immediately.
Mm-hmm.
We owe it to them to also stand in the space for them as well. There's a whole nother message that you are
Mm-hmm.
communicating with the story behind your mom, and still standing for her too, even at this point. Um, Forgiving, there's just so many other things that I can go into about
Yes.
how deep claiming space really is.
Would you can share that with what I wrote with the readers if you'd like. I mean, I love what I wrote it with my son.
Go ahead. No,
Oh,
we'll post. We can post that. We can
yeah,
post
you can post it. You can post it. It's I really struggled with having the right words, and because her story was never told. She's a missing person, and we'll talk about that the next time we talk. But she's a missing person, and I wanted her to not vanish into invisibility. I wanted to claim space for her, so that was my gift to her.
that is amazing. And again, a lesson for all of us to take, not just professionally, because a lot of times we think about the professional side of life, but this is
Mm-hmm.
also personal.
Mm-hmm.
Hoping that all of the listeners hear and sense that emotional component and the urgency of what
Yes.
space really is. So I thank you so much, Eliza.
I am honored. Honored.
I want to thank all of the listeners for joining us for another rich conversation in the nick of time, and understanding that, oh my God, even with this guide, you now have a new tool to understand the actualization that you already possess everything you need to be successful. Success as you define it. And go out and live. And as I say, you need to start showing up and sharing out. Until next time, go be blessed. Make sure you check us out at nikkiroach.com. And you can also get a recap of this and see the video. You can actually see our faces if you go over to the Nikki Roach YouTube page. We have more information for you. But again, thank you so much. And we'll see you soon. Go and be great.